Welcome to our Gifts of God Sunday talk. I'm so happy to have you here. And it's a small group today, but yeah, I think of that parable with Jesus where he said, well, if there's just one sheep out there, the shepherd goes and makes sure it's okay, so it's not about numbers, it's about attention and caring and that sort of thing. So welcome here. It's been a good week. I started a new book, and I'm pretty clear about it. The name of it will be Promise of the Future. And it had a bit of a birthing this week. Sandra gave me this Science of Mind prayer, and I can send it to you guys. I have it in a PDF, and it's just like a 9-point, kind of a prayer where you consider different things, right? Request, state your goal of what you'd like this prayer treatment to be about. Recognition, God is all there is and is the source of my good. Rapport, I am one with God, and whatever is true about God is true about me. Resolution, clearly state your goal as if it's already happened. Renewal, arrive at the conviction that you're healed of anything blocking the goal. Realization, I accept this healing. I have no doubt that my prayer is answered. Reward and rejoicing, thank you, God, that my goal's fulfilled. Release, give your prayer over to the Divine Mother and let her take it over. And revelation, and sit in quiet and allow nature to manifest. So anyhow, I did this process one evening, and what was it I wanted to be healed, or what was my goal? And as I was sitting there meditating, it just came to me, this phrase, promise of the future. And I was a little bit, I went through this kind of emotional release, because I think this is common to everybody. You start certain phases in your life or certain things in your life. And for me, I was thinking back to when Sandra and I got together in 2008. And there was such a promise of the future. There was such a newness. There was such a, just like unlimited, unending possibilities, So I had that feeling when we first got together. And we were together for a year in California, and then we moved to Nashville. We lived there for 8 years. Then we moved here. We've been here for almost 8 years, 7 years, I think. This year we'll be here 7 years. So I had this kind of a flashback to just how positive and how this promise of the future was so strong 15 years ago. And as I was thinking about it, I was thinking, well, where are you now with it? And I could just see the whole unfolding of those 15 years and traveling around the world and all the people we met and all the people we dealt with and worked with. And some we still work with, but many of them came and went. And, a lot of our work that used to be strong in certain areas aren't so much there anymore. Like South America, we used to go every year and we'd have 8 or 9 stops there. And then gradually, there were places we didn't go. And then so gradually now we're at a point where we're not even so keen on going to South America. So things like that, where over the years, they just had their own course. You know, they played out, they came, they went. It was wonderful when it was there. And then also some people die off, you know, like some of the people aren't there because they've passed. And some of the people aren't there because they just go a different direction. And so I was thinking about this whole thing. And then this phrase, promise of the future. Well, then when I was asking myself, well, how do you feel about that phrase now? What is that promise of the future for yourself now? And I have to admit, it put me in a rebirth. It kind of put me in a kind of an emotional place where I was wondering, well, why don't I feel so on top of the world now that I did 15 years ago or 16 years ago, right? So I felt like that promise of the future had faded a bit, and it made me sad. And then people that I had worked with, or Sandra and I had worked with, who are no longer there, and we had such great times with them. And that kind of made me sad a bit. You know, they were here and now they're not here. So I was thinking about that and having my bit of a rebirth. Sandra and I had our cry sort of on the couch, you know, we're going through this whole thing. And it was all because she gave me this prayer to do, right? And I'm like, when I do something, I'd go really deep into it, and it just put me in a rebirth that was really strong. And then kind of the result of that, after we had our discussion, and I haven't written a book in a couple of years. My last one was this Sanctuary of Silence I wrote, you know, when the pandemic just started. And I haven't written anything since then. But then this phrase, promise of the future, I just couldn't get it out of my head, right? So after about a day from having this rebirth, I thought, well, I just sat down and started to write. And like I always do, just like I start my talks, I don't know what the heck I'm going to write about, or I don't know what the heck I'm going to say. I just start, and one thing leads to the next, and I just go from one fact to the next fact to the next fact. And before you know it, it has a train of thought and a pattern, and I just stay with it. And that's often how I write. And now I have a couple of styles of writing. One style is where I just write what I call good for one page. I just write something. It's back in the days when I kept a journal, and I would just write one page, and I would start at the top and I would end at the bottom, and it would be a complete thought. It would be a complete whatever it was on just one page. And then I would do that every day. And then those became kind of like prose poems, you know? So some of my work, like Odes to the Divine Mother, that's how I wrote that. It has 365 odes that are kind of prose poems honoring the Divine Mother. And that's one style of writing I have. And then the other style is where I write a book with chapters, and it's on a subject. And then it has different chapters, and it's prose. But the chapters could be 5 pages long, 6 pages long, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. And then I put that together, and it's on one theme, and it's more strictly prose. And so that's kind of the style I'm writing this next book. And I have 2 chapters done. So I'm kind of happy about that I'm back in the creative flow. And we've been watching these videos on authors, these documentaries on authors. We watched one on Kurt Vonnegut. We watched one on, what's his name? Thomas Wolfe, and various ones. So then I realized from watching the Kurt Vonnegut, which I had read some in my college days, that his most famous book, Slaughterhouse-Five, I hadn't read. And it was about his time during World War II, where he was a young soldier, and he was captured by the Germans and taken to a prisoner of war camp in Dresden, of all places. And Dresden was firebombed by the Allies, and it was when the war was almost over, and it was before they dropped the bomb on, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But for some reason, they decided to bomb Dresden and the Allies. And Dresden really had no military factories, or there were no divisions there. There was no army there. It was actually a cultural center. It was this kind of a beautiful, preserved architectural jewel of Germany, right? It was considered like a Venice or an Amsterdam. It was like a beautiful city, and the Allies just bombed it. And there was a lot of criticism about that and a lot of cover-up. Like, people didn't even know so much that it happened. Well, as it turns out, more people were killed in Dresden than in Hiroshima. I think the death toll in Hiroshima was something like 80,000 or 70,000, and 150,000 people were killed overnight when they firebombed Dresden. And it was not like the nuclear bomb was so fast, and it was like people were just evaporated in seconds, right? But with Dresden, they dropped these incendiary bombs that were fire bombs. So it started fires everywhere, and people literally burned to death. And they could be not even where the bomb fell, and the heat was so intense that they would just spontaneously catch on fire, and it was horrible. So anyhow, this Slaughterhouse-Five was about Kurt Vonnegut was in this prison camp in an old slaughterhouse for, where they slaughtered livestock, right? And so he was in this kind of a concrete bunker type building with the other prisoners, and they actually survived because they were in this sort of a bunker of a, indestructible building. Had they not been in such a building, they would not have survived. But anyhow, he survived. And then, of course, he's witnessing the aftermath of all that. And then it took him 25 years to write this story about it. And that was Slaughterhouse-Five. And it became pretty much a anti-war treatise. But so I'd never read it. So I read it. I downloaded it on a PDF that I got for free off the internet. And a couple nights I read the thing. Now, I liked Kurt Vonnegut. I liked his style. He was kind of funny. He kind of has a stream of consciousness style of writing. And this was sort of in that style. And it kind of time traveled. It was back in the wartime, and then it was fast forward in the 60s. And it had a lot of different time frames. And it had this character, Billy Pilgrim, and he was the main character. And it kind of, gave a overview of his life. And Billy Pilgrim it was kind of science fiction too. And I'd forgotten this about Vonnegut, because Billy Pilgrim, part of the line in the story was that he had been abducted by aliens from another, like a flying saucer came down and abducted him and took him to another planet. And, he had this other experience. And this is all woven into the story, and I'm not so much into science fiction. And I'd kind of forgotten that Kurt Vonnegut, there was a line of him that was sort of into that. So I read the story and I got a lot out of it as far as his accounts of the war and all of that. But because I'm not so much into science fiction, it was kind of like, yeah, well, I can see where it became, a popular novel at the time, but I like some of his other work better. But reading this book, it kind of got me into the thoughts, and watching these stories about the writers, it kind of got me in the mood to start another book myself. And plus, I've been very much in the mood because I've been putting this book together for Sandra lately. I've been thinking 3, and it's done. It's out on Amazon now. It's in a hardback. It'll be out in a paperback March 17th. But right now you can get a hardback or you can get the ebook. So I've been in book mode lately, right? So after I got Sandra's book finished, I thought, well, what next? And we've got a couple of weeks before India. And so I thought, and then I had this experience of this promise of the future, right? Promise of the future. And it just kind of hit me like, that's the new book. And I don't really have the vision of the future that I had when I first met Sandra, but it could be different. It could be not that it's less than, but whatever that is, I know it'll be more these online things that we're doing, like when we first got together 16 years ago, we did hardly anything online. But then gradually our work became more online. Back in the days of Skype, do you remember Skype? It was revolutionary for me to say to Sandra, we can do some sessions over Skype. So if people want breathwork sessions, we could do them over Skype, right? And that was really stretching her mind. She couldn't really get that, but we started doing them. And then we found out they were very effective and very good, and people wanted them. And then that was sort of one era, the Skype era, but we were still traveling like crazy, We would be on the road, 85% of the year. We'd be home for 2 weeks and then we'd be out for 2 months, and it was a rigorous life. And now it's kind of it's reversed. We're home mostly now doing our online work. And then we have these quests where we go for very intensely for a couple of weeks or 3 weeks. And that I like that rhythm better. And I like the home life being more than the road life. So, and I like the online work that we're doing. And I know you, Brenda, you've taken some of our online classes, and I think we can deliver them just as well as we can in person. And I think we're getting our presence strong enough to be able to transmit that through something online, so that we're getting better at that. So I really don't see so much of a difference between, we got to go somewhere and in person do something, or we do something online. I really don't see quite the difference anymore that I used to, which is good because it saves a lot of overhead to do things online. You saved your airfare, your hotel bill, your venue fees. There's so as a result of doing more things online, we're actually doing better financially than we were. So I like that part too. And the creative part, It's wonderful. And I can write better when I'm home, because I have everything here. And so that's kind of where we are. Well, anyhow, so then what is this thing about the future and this promise of the future? Because the Course would say, don't even think about it. Place the future in the hands of God, right? I place the future in the hands of God. And the past is over. It can touch me not. And so you've got your good memories and your not so good memories, but it's all the same. It's all the past. It's not here. Only the present is valid, So what is your present? What is your present? Can we honestly say we have no demons from the past bugging us or regrets from the past bugging us? And can we say that we have total faith in the future, that everything is only going to get better? That's the ultimate present. Christ's vision is totally in the present. And he's not concerned about what happened yesterday or even an hour ago. It's like, what is in front of him right now, or her? What is in front of you right now? And then this thing about the future, why do we need an agenda? A lot of self-development teachers are always working with goals. Like you need to have a goal, you need to have a vision of the future that you can keep in your mind and that you can use your power of your creative thought to manifest that, So goals are very, very important. And I'm not so sure goals are that important. I'm getting to that point where if you're really in the present, right? Now, this doesn't mean you're lazy. You still have your faculties, you still have your talents, you still have your passions for whatever that is that you do, right? But as far as the future, it says, I place the future in the hands of God. I place the future in this kind of protection of whatever it is now that you're doing is going to extend itself, and that extension takes care of the future. You don't have to so much be preoccupied with it. So I really like that philosophy a lot better than worrying about the future, because that's sometimes what we fall into. We fall into this fear of the future. And I think that I was falling into that when I was doing this process on well, what is your goal? What is your intention? And what is the problem you want to solve? And then this promise of the future, like this very positive kind of looking forward to feeling that I had when I first got together with Sandra Ray. And Sandra was on top of her game. Like I was 54 and Sandra was 68. And 68 is a little different than 82, like 16 years at that age, it can turn your whole, mindset around. Like you do things differently, when you're 82 than when you're 68. So I was seeing this progression, And then I was seeing like, well, what does the promise of the future look like for me now? You know, it's much different than it was when I was 54. I'm going to be 70 in November. Sandra's going to be 83 in August. So we're getting into that period where it's a challenge for most people. Now we're trying to see it differently. And Sandra's been processing in herself. You know, one of the things we look at is this unconscious death urge, right? And we've written a lot about it. We teach a lot about it. And then, you know, this whole last year was kind of I call it my annus horribilis. Like that's what the Queen called one of her years, right? When Windsor Castle burned down. And it's like my brother-in-law died, my sister kicked me out of the house and cut me off. And that was kind of not so fun, you know? And then Sandra went through some things. And so we went through some things last year that were not so fun, right? And so now I'm thinking, okay, now here I am. What is the promise of the future? I think we put that year behind us, by the way. And actually, the ice is broken a little bit. My sister is communicating a little bit with Sandra. And so I think that period is in the past. But now I'm thinking a lot, okay, what's the future? What's the future going to look like for us in this work that we're doing? So it's been very much on my mind. And to the degree, like, I want to start there. And this next book is going to be about that. And I think everyone has that. Like, everyone is in that juncture of the present with some kind of an action that's going to take them into the future. And do we really give attention to that, you know? And maybe we should give attention to that. Not in the sense that we have a goal and we want to project it and then we want to accomplish that goal, but we do want to ascend in our awareness of who we are, you know? So the whole point of the Course in Miracles is to ascend into the Christ consciousness, right? So, and Christ is there leading our hand doing that. So we would be amiss to say, if we're that interested in the Course, that, oh, the Christ consciousness is not a big deal for us. No, it is a big deal. In fact, that's why we are studying the Course, to enter into this frequency of liberation, frequency of enlightenment, frequency of the absolute, you know? The absolute state of being truly a human being. And so we're interested in that. And you could call it a goal, but it's sort of an open-ended thing. We don't really know all the parts that's going to lead us there, but we do know that the Course is clear, and whatever we receive from that is helping us to ascend. So that's always going to be there for me. That's always going to be there. Whether I'm writing a book or giving a workshop or producing a painting or whatever it is on the road, that's always going to be there, that ascension process into more perfect awareness of who I am. And I think everybody has that. Everyone has that inner yearning. So one thing I have I'm very lucky to have, I've met some people that have helped us with our books. And one is a lady that was on the Gifts of God last year, Barbara Milburn. She's been an editor of ours for years, helping us with our books. And so she's kind of a good confidant for me when it comes to writing, and also when it comes to actually putting a book together. She knew all the parts and all the things, and got me on track. And so she's really helped me in being able to put together a book and publish the book and get it professionally there. A lot of self-published books look self-published. And I told Sandra, look, if we're going to self-publish, it's got to look like professional books. We're not going to do something that looks half-assed. And my teacher, Tara Singh, was the same way. He self-published his books, but they looked professional. They looked like every other book. And there are certain things you have to know, which I've learned over the years. Do this, but never do this. If you do this, it just reeks of self-publishing and you're not knowing what you're doing. But if you do it this way, it's like everybody else's published book out there. It's got a professional standard. So I think Barbara has helped us maintain that professional standard. And plus, she's got a good mind for our work and what we're doing and the content of it. And she's helped edit and actually transcribe, like number of my books were written in hand journals, by hand. And she transcribed the whole thing and typed them up in Word. I mean, like some of these books were this thick, right? 300 pages, all handwritten. And she would type it up and then give me the file, and then I'd go back in and tweak it. And so she's been just phenomenal in our world. Well, so this book, this one I'm working on now, this Promise of the Future, and it's how I wrote the last one. I had this other student who was pretty sharp, and she wanted to help me on the book. So I would write one chapter, then I'd send her the chapter. And so she would look it over, think about it, make suggestions, of course, do any correction that needed to be made with grammar, punctuation, spelling, all that. So she did that, but she also would have comments about, well, where is this chapter going, and is this clear, and so forth. Well, so Barbara is going to be my sort of secret sharer, I think, on this next book, and I'll send her one chapter at a time. And like I sent her the first chapter, and then I used this phrase in some sentence that we're in a time of spiritual need. People have spiritual needs. And she said, well, what do you mean by that? So, so chapter 2 is about spiritual needs. What did I mean by saying that people are in this place where they're looking for something not in their everyday life necessarily that fulfills a spiritual need? And many of us, like in our generation, we left organized religion. It's like it didn't sing to us anymore. It had too many, contradictions and too many things that didn't feel right. So we left organized religion, but we're still spiritual people. We're not atheists. We haven't totally thrown the baby out with the bathwater. And so we're still asking these spiritual questions. And for that's the audience I want to write to. And I think there are a lot of young people in that audience now too. They didn't have parents who took them to Sunday school every week like we did. And so they're a bit lost in that spiritual domain, and I want to kind of address that in this book, Promise of the Future. And what are the spiritual needs, and how can we go about meeting them? And even though I probably will mention the Course in Miracles, I don't want to make that the main thing, you know? Like I might use it a little in reference, but I also want to use some of my other things that I've studied over the years. I remember when I was in art school, there was this writer, William Barrett. He was a philosopher, and he wrote this book on existentialism called Irrational Man. And then he had this other book, Time of Need. And so when I was in art school, I read his work, and basically he was saying the same thing. You know, it's like Nietzsche wrote that God is dead, and a lot of people found organized religion, you know, not speaking to their higher truth, and so they left the church. And Nietzsche kind of said, well, you know, God is dead. And then this whole existential movement came out of that with Jean-Paul Sartre and a lot of the feminists and so forth. And he wrote about that. And when I was in art school, that was very relevant, you know. This was before the Course in Miracles, before studying yoga, before going to India, before all of that, right? But it was still very much on the forefront of people's minds. You know, what is fulfilling their spiritual need? And that was kind of the theme that William Barrett was taking up. He was saying, well, yeah, Nietzsche wrote God is dead and people left the church, but they still have a spiritual need, you know, time of need. It's time of need. And it's like, well, 2 world wars later and a Cold War with the possibility of blowing up the whole planet, there's something wrong with this picture, right? So maybe we're not churchgoers anymore, but we have to consider something deeper in the nature of man. And that's a very important question to ask ourselves. And I think that out of those kinds of questions, the Course in Miracles sprang forth, you know? We wouldn't have had the Course in Miracles had it not been those people who kind of said, well, enough is enough. We can't keep teaching false theology of guilt and original sin and, you know, hell, going to hell and going to heaven and all this stuff. We can't keep believing that's so. But then, okay, we give all that up. Now what? Now what? I mean, the nuclear age could destroy us. So we better have some moral basis on which to stand, some ethical basis on which to stand. And then, you know, a lot of those philosophers, they didn't even talk so much about love, let's say, love being a factor. Where does that come from? Usually love is in the domain of spiritual masters, you know, one of them being Christ or Buddha or Muhammad or, you know, those kind of characters. So how do you get in touch with that and give up your connection to these spiritual masters? So there's a lot of questions, right? A lot of questions. And I think the Course answered some of those for us. It's like we could embrace the teachings of Jesus. Let's just call it what it is. We can embrace the teachings of Jesus again without the context of the church and the false theology of the church, and really get the truth of it, of the matter, you know, really make the connection. And then many of us, you know, look to the East I'm thinking the time, when the Beatles went to India and gurus came to America. That was very much a part of our makeup, you know? Like we were children of the East and the West, and we wanted to bridge that. So, and I think that's still true. And I think has the bridge fully been made? I'm not so sure, you know. But we were the ones that took up that banner. Oh, we've got to look into the Eastern things, and we've got to study the yoga, and we've got to, expand our spiritual parameters. And I think we're still doing that. And I think it's still relevant. And I think we haven't fully planted that tree of life in our everyday destiny. Now, I'm not talking about your destiny or my destiny. That's pretty strong. But what about society as a whole? Is that tree planted? Are we looking at that? I mean, one of the things I want to look at in this book is like, what's the value of war? Why do we still have to have all these weapons? I mean, don't we see enough of the interconnectedness of humankind that we could step outside of that? I think there are enough of us that see this interconnectedness, that we see that if we're doing a war of people over here, it's a war on ourselves. And I think we're smart enough to get that, I think there's enough out there that we can get that. And people at large can get that. Maybe people, I keep thinking Capitol Hill because I can look over there and there's the Capitol, right? Well, what if the people there got that? And obviously they're not getting it. I saw this kind of news clip where they're using the American military to form these humanitarian platforms where they can offload supplies to the Gaza Strip. Well, that's all well and good because there's a humanitarian need there, but they're also supplying the bombs that are destroying it. So do you see that contradiction? It's like we supplied Israel with the bombs to totally obliterate the Gaza Strip, and then out of our guilt, we want to try to fix it and send the food to help the people we just bombed. Now, what sense does that make? There's just other interests involved, There's other interests involved that are not in alignment with humanism. And why? Why? Doesn't have to be that way. We watched a thing on Warren Buffett last night. He's the richest man in the world. He's like, I don't know, a few years ago, it was like 67 billion. Now I think it's over 100 billion that he's worth. But most of that money, he's got his kids, he had 3 children, and they're set up in foundations to give most of that money away. So and he always lived kind of a simple life, in a regular house in Omaha, and, drove his own car, and, he was not extravagant, but he was just smart. He knew how to make money in the stock market, and he just did, and companies and so forth. But he's not greedy, and he's sharing his wealth. And I think that's the right stance, and we have to get to this point where whatever it is that we're productive with, we're using that rightly, and we're not in conflict with ourselves. How do we get to that point of inner peace where we're not in conflict with ourselves, or we're not in conflict with our brothers? It has to start within us first, you know. It's like the goodness has to come out of somebody, something, right? I mean, it took a Gandhi to liberate India, but he had this kind of egalitarian love for humanity, you know? And same with Lincoln, you know, he had this kind of egalitarian love for humanity. And that's what's needed. And why not? Why not? And shouldn't those be our leaders? People in that kind of touch with something humanistic. Yeah. So it's interesting, you know, we met this lady in Babaji's ashram in the Himalayas who happens to be one of the U.S. Senator's main aides, and she's living in our building. We're going to see her tonight for the Oscars. So Sandra wants to watch the Oscars, and she has the TV, so we're going up there. And for a number of months, we've been sort of feeding her little things to give to the senator, a little book on Babaji, a little book on this, a little book on that. So we'll see where that goes. I think our friend's a little bit hesitant, even though she knows about Babaji, and we met her at a Babaji ashram. People are a little bit hesitant in the professional world to embrace the fact that there are such beings that are mystics that may be wiser than professionals, you know. So that we would fall into that category. You know, I wouldn't call us professionals, although we conduct ourselves professionally. But mystics are a class unto themselves, you know. And I would put them with philosophers and saints and those people. So we'll see. I mean, I would like to have a sit down with Lisa Murkowski is this senator's name. She's the senator from Alaska, which already makes her not in the regular mold, you know, because Alaska is quite a different world, you know. It's and she has supported all the indigenous people up there and a lot of their interests, and you know, it's still a bit pristine. You know, it hasn't totally been corrupted by the other 48 states. So she has kind of a nice purity about her. We actually met her once a couple of years, well, last year when she was being sworn in. She just won the election again. And Dana, our friend, invited us to her swearing in. We actually met her and her parents, and I liked her a lot. So I had this vision that she could possibly be the first woman president, you know, that we had. And I think we do need a woman president. I think we need divine mother energy coming into the system. And I think we're going to do everything we can to see that happen. And not necessarily a woman who is a woman in, it's a man in woman's clothing, you know. We don't need that. No, we really need a female, you know. So we'll see. I hope you're liking the podcasts. We're kind of back on track with them, doing them every day. And yeah, this last bit, God or the ego, healing, a lot about healing, a lot about inviting the Holy Spirit in, to be our guide. And we have to host the Holy Spirit, be the host of the Holy Spirit. But we also have to listen to the voice. Like Sandra said, well, we can invite the Holy Spirit in. And I said, yes, but you got to listen too, You've got to listen and then follow the directions. And it's not just a matter of saying, well, I've invited in the Holy Spirit. No, you have to actually stop and listen and take action in those directions. So I think there's sort of a new hope or something, promise of the future. I feel a new promise of the future coming in. And I don't know what it's going to look like, but I don't have to know how it's going to look like, because the Holy Spirit knows what it's supposed to look like. And it'll be revealed incrementally as we go along. We don't have to worry about these grandiose goals. It'll just come. It'll just flow. And that's the way our work is going right now. We have almost 30 people coming on the India Quest. We have 28. We could have 3 more. So we have space for 3 more, which they might show up in the next couple of weeks or they might not. But even 28, that's a pretty large pile of people to take halfway around the world and keep them all intact and stay for 2.5 weeks and get back alive. So there it is. And so life is giving us stuff to do that we love to do. And that's our future, and so we can plan in relationship to what we're good at and what we've already proven is great for us and great for the people. And we just keep doing that, and maybe it'll grow. I don't know. Mantra breathing, Brenda, we had 31 people yesterday. So that was that's great. Okay, I've been saying, okay, we got 20, let's go to 30. Well, yesterday we broke through, we had 31. And all right, so let's consistently do 31 or 30. And then maybe we'll have 40, and then maybe we'll have 50. And, it'll grow on its own. It'll grow on its own. And also that be happy where it is. Be happy where it is. Like I'm happy you show up on Sunday and we could have these discussions. And it doesn't matter. The numbers don't matter. And it may grow, it may go this way, that way, but it's keeping me on track, and it's productive and it's creative, and it has its own fragrance, its own, thing, and people are benefiting. And plus I'm also making the YouTubes so other people can see them too if they blunder into it. So it's going out there, and the Course in Miracles is here to stay. And the good thing about the podcasts and these YouTubes that I make, there are a couple of Course in Miracles Facebook groups. One's got 30,000 people on it, And so I put these things up there, and who knows who sees them, but it's 30,000 possible people that could see this, So, okay, it's fine. And I noticed that they leave my stuff up there, they don't take it down. Like sometimes these people that have these groups, they're very protective of only the stuff they put on there. And I've been throwing them up there, and I see that they're there. So it's extending, and I think that's important. Yeah.